will be our fourth reading of The Old and the Beautiful. It'll be a total of 5 parts. So we wanted to go ahead and give just a brief overview of what we've seen in episodes 1 through 14. So previously on The Old and the Beautiful, in the first half of season 1, we met Cordelia Buttons and her best friend Millicent Trueworthy, residents of Shady Bluff Senior Living. Soon after the arrival of a mysterious Count Dandy Carruthers, sinister happenings began. Chef Maxime Brule, the head chef at Shady Bluff, is murdered, drowned in a pot of her tomato soup. After executive director Regina Inkler agrees to meet up with the new resident, the Count, at a shady motel, she fails to show up for work the next morning. Pippi, the resident services director, learns from wellness director Malpractice, who we see on the screen, that she has been receiving sinister notes, including the following: roses are red, violets are blue, you killed your husband, will it kill you? Mal tells Pippi that she saw Cordelia holding a note in the same color of stationery the night that Mal helped Cordelia up from a fall in the garden. She believes that Cordelia is the one responsible for sending all of the notes. Meanwhile, we realize that executive director Regina has woken up to find herself tied to a chair in the motel room where she was supposed to meet the Count, who never showed. The door opens as she realizes that she's a prisoner of Chef Maxime, who she thought had been murdered in a pot of tomato soup. Unfortunately, Regina barely has time to react before Chef Maxime strangles her. Cordelia, having snuck into the Count's apartment back at Shady Bluff, is hiding in the closet from handsome lawn boy Jimmy Steele and the Count's wife, Countess Lily Rose. Jimmy is actually an escaped convict, and he's the son of Regina. Regina's been hiding him. He's working with the Countess, who is determined to learn of a secret that Cordelia's best friend Millicent is hiding, something that she can use to her own advantage. And finally, while all this is going on, Millicent shares her experience with the Count, who she's been dating, the previous night with friends Tina and Johnny. And they laugh, thinking about all the drinks she had and the fact that she believed she saw a UFO. But as she recounts the tale, she realizes that she was drugged, and that while she was drugged, the Count had stolen the key from her safe deposit box. And that's where we ended.
All right, Joe, are you ready? You're our first episode.
Okay. The sound of the Count's soles on the bank's floor echoed through the bank as he followed the manager to the security vault. I hope Miss Trueworthy is doing okay. You understand that for her to send someone on her behalf is normally considered unorthodox, but after the last visit, we could only sympathize, Mr. Trueworthy. The Count tried to hide a smile as he was ushered in, and both parties placed their keys into the safe deposit box. As long as you carried yourself with authority and acted as if you had every right to be doing what you were doing, no one ever dared question you, even when your lie was as blatant as being the husband to a woman who never remarried after her divorce. The manager stepped back, but the Count dismissed him with a wave of his hand. Of course, sir, if you need anything when you're done, simply press the buzzer here. The manager indicated a button on the table. I'll be right in. Once the Count had the room to himself, he began to open the box. He couldn't believe it was this easy. Millicent hadn't even known what was happening. Just a little drink, a little drug, and she giggled the entire time he ransacked her apartment. He ignored a small pang of regret. He had to admit she was gorgeous and so sweet, not always conniving like Regina and his wife. But it was better this way, even though she would never forgive his betrayal. Still, he wished that stupid plant operations director had been able to find it, but the man was an idiot. Count Dandy lifted the lid and frowned. The box was empty, save for a small envelope, the corner of which was lodged in the middle lip along the very back edge. He cursed and slammed his hand down on the buzzer. Impatiently, he waited for the manager to let him out. He thought about opening the letter, but no, better to wait until he was back in the apartment where he could read it in absolute privacy. As he entered the lobby of the Shady Bluffs Senior Living, his cell phone rang. The screen identified the number as unlisted. Normally, the Count would never answer the phone from someone he didn't know. Too many leeches trying to scam people out of their money. But he was expecting this call. "Hello," he asked, waving his hand dismissively at the receptionist who was standing at her desk calling his name. She looked positively frantic, but he didn't have time for whatever she thought she needed to tell him. "Is it taken care of?" said a voice on the other end. "Well, there's been, how shall I put it, a hiccup." "What do you mean?" The man's voice on the other end of the line was barely above a whisper, yet it communicated strength, authority, and above all, warning. "The contents were not what we anticipated. Somebody must have gotten there before me," said the Count. "But they did leave us something. It appears to be a note." "A note?" the man said, and the Count noticed a small hesitation and nervousness in the question. "What did it say?" "Oh, a little of this, a little of that. It was most illuminating," lied the Count. He pressed the button to the elevator. The blasted thing was taking forever. "I want you to destroy it," the man said, "and I want to watch you do it. Set it on fire, rip it into 1,000 pieces, and flush it down the toilet. But whatever you do, I want it on video so I can see it happen." The Count smiled. "Of course, I'm sure you'll make it worth my while to eliminate something so valuable. Trust me, you'll be taken care of." "I hope you mean monetarily, and that's not a threat, Senator," the Count said. "I'm a man of my word, Count," said the senator. Count Dandy pursed his lips. The senator's evasion of his question did not go unnoticed. He ended the phone call and pressed the button to the elevator again. He could feel his fury rising. The only thing stopping him from flying into a rage was the collateral he now carried with him, a note written, the Count assumed, by Millicent, and the contents held a secret to something the senator was keen to see destroyed. The Count knew he was in a very dangerous position, but he had been backed into a corner before and always fought his way out, emerging victorious with those who would threaten him at his complete mercy. He heard the sound of the elevator motor and the car descending from the floors above. He smiled to himself. No one was going to stop him from getting what he wanted.
Very good. All right, I'm Kaylin, and I have episode 16. "There's nothing else to talk about," the Countess said to Jimmy as he stared, flabbergasted at the pistol she had pulled from her purse. She was perched on the edge of her husband's bed. "You're threatening my mother," he said. His hands were squeezed into fists. He would do anything to protect his mom, including going back to jail. The Countess smiled. "And you," she said, "don't you think that you can play the hero and make everything go away? If you were to go back to jail, your mom's role in hiding you would come to light, and she would go to jail. If you tell anyone if you tell anyone about what I'm up to, I'll expose you, and your mom will go to jail. If something happens to me, a friend will expose you, and your mom will go to jail. You might not mind being behind bars, but I bet Regina Inkler wouldn't last very long." "So what happens next, huh? You just keep me under your thumb for the rest of your life?" Jimmy asked, a note of desperation coming to the surface. "No, Jimmy, just wait until we can see our plan through to the end. I just need to make sure you don't get cold feet." Jimmy gritted his teeth and tried to think, but thinking came hard for Jimmy sometimes, and he grunted in frustration. The Countess stood up, the pistol safely tucked away in her purse again. I'm not going to sit here all day and wait for my husband to show up. Lord knows what he and your mother have been up to. Can't even bother to show up for work from what I hear. Jimmy frowned. In all of the commotion earlier, he'd not noticed his mother wasn't in the building. It wasn't like her at all to be late for work. I'll leave and you can sneak out a few minutes after me. Take the stairs. I don't want anyone to see us together, the Countess said, and she opened the door, walking quickly to the elevator. As Jimmy started to leave, he heard a sound come from the closet. He stopped and looked back, but before he could investigate, he heard the elevator ding as if it opened for Countess Lily, reminding him that a resident or caregiver could come down the hall at any moment and there would be no plausible reason for him to be in the Count's room. He pulled the door behind him as he left. Cordelia, having banged her calf against something in the closet, sighed with relief when she heard the door close for the second time. She had been certain she was about to be discovered, and considering the two parties on the other side of the door, she didn't like her chances of getting away unscathed. As she stepped out of the closet, she looked around to make sure no one was waiting to ambush her, but the room was empty. She turned back to the closet, staring at its contents. Inside were rows of small screens, all of them broadcasting the apartments of Shady Bluff residents. Even Cordelia's room was under surveillance. Beyond the invasion of privacy, the embarrassment of her private moments and acts recorded for another to watch, Cordelia was uncertain what the Count could possibly gain by keeping his neighbors under surveillance. As she scanned the screens one final time, she saw in one of the displays Millicent, Tina, and Joni sitting around a small table. Cordelia immediately recognized it as Millicent's room. Cordelia crept out of the Count's apartment, forgetting to close the closet door where she'd been hiding. As she left, she smoothed her hair back and walked quickly to Millicent's apartment. Hard feelings be darned, she had to warn her that the Count was up to something that involved her and put her in harm's way. When Millicent opened the door, Cordelia braced herself to be rebuffed, but instead, Millicent, with eyes puffy from tears, smiled with obvious relief. Thank God you're here, Cordelia. Something terrible has happened. I don't know what to do, Millicent said. I have bad news of my own, I'm afraid, said Cordelia. She took a seat at the table, and the friends, putting misunderstandings behind them, told each other of what they had learned. All right, Donna, you're up next.
Okay, I'm Donna Birdsong, and I'm reading episode 17. The Countess had a bad habit of talking to herself. As she rode the elevator down, she huffed. I have a feeling my husband is somewhere in this building. I've just not caught that snake yet. She checked her nails to ensure they'd not chipped. She cleared her throat. The elevator jerked as it came to a halt, causing her to lose her balance a little. Ruffled, she tried to compose herself as the doors opened, to reveal her husband, Count Dandy Carruthers, standing in front of her, his mouth hanging open in surprise. Just what do you think you are doing? Asked the Countess, who wanted to scream, but managed to keep her voice to a hiss. My dear wife, I am delighted to see you, the Count said, smiling unctuously. He made to take his wife's hand, but she pulled it away. If you think I don't know what you've been doing, you're sorely mistaken, husband, she replied. I know what you've been up to and with whom you've been up to it with. Don't be absurd, Lily. Have you taken your pills today? You know how you can get a little confused if you forget them. One day I'll have your head on a plate, Dandy. Mark my words. The day you try that, sweet one, is the day you'll find yourself 6 feet underground. The Countess smiled, a cold, calculating smile that instantly set the Count's palms to sweating. Where's your darling? The woman who runs this place. Regina Inkler, I believe her name is. How would I know? Don't play dumb with me, Dandy. Like I said, I know what you've been up to. I assume she took the day off. I don't know or care what the administrator of this building does. I wonder, the Countess said, if you would change your tune if something were to happen to her. The Count's face reddened and he took a step toward her, hands outstretched as if to throttle her. But the Countess was quicker and lighter on her feet, and she dodged. One leg thrust out so the Count tripped. His head slammed against the elevator's metal door. The Countess looked down. What a pathetic excuse of a husband, she said. She lifted her skirt and stepped over his body. As she made her way out, she signaled to a caregiver leaving an apartment. I believe you might want to check on the Count, said the Countess. It seems he fainted. He might have a concussion. And she walked on, her heels clanking against the tile floor. Back at Downing Dump's motel, Patrick, the motel's part-time and only housekeeper and maintenance man, who was finally getting around to painting over the graffiti on one of the walls, had watched the woman in a chef's jacket speed away. There was something about her movements that had the hairs on the back of Patrick's neck standing up. There can't be a lick of a good thing in this, he thought, as he glanced toward the room she'd recently exited. Patrick had been employed by the motel long enough to know that sometimes bad things happened in these rooms. No one took a room at this motel for the pleasure of it. It was a quiet, hidden, everyone was willing to look the other way when something happened. The owner had told Patrick that he was to mind his own business. The less we know, the less trouble we can get in, he'd said to Patrick. But Patrick ignored that memory, his curiosity getting the better of him. He set the paintbrush down and dashed to the room. The door was locked, a do not disturb sign hanging from the handle. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, taking in an overturned table and a chair with more rope than anyone should need in a hotel huddled around its legs. Oh my gosh, what's happened here? Patrick said aloud. He took a step closer to the chair and saw, glinting on the floor, a gold bracelet. From any other angle, he would have missed it, as it was mostly under the bed, hidden from sight. Patrick thought, if I look the other way, they probably will too, and I don't get paid enough anyway. I deserve a little bonus. He bent down to pick up the jewelry, but as he pulled it, he realized it was attached to something. He gave a tug, and the bracelet gave way, as did an arm. Its hand fastened in a grip. Uh-oh, thought Patrick, springing back quickly. He didn't want anything to do with a dead body. Nevertheless, he knelt, going to all fours to get a better look at what had been pushed beneath the bed. I better get out of here, he thought. But just as he was about to rise again, he heard a wheezing sound, followed by a shallow inhalation. The woman was alive. Patrick almost wished that she wasn't, because now he had only one option, and it would probably get him fired. He pulled his cell phone from his pocket and dialed 911. The Countess pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store, driving around to the back where a lone car sat idling. She crept up toward it until her window was parallel with the other drivers. Simultaneously, the windows were lowered and the Countess smiled at the car's occupant. Do you know how long I've been waiting? The woman in the chef's jacket said. The Countess's smile cooled. She did not like being addressed in this manner, but she decided to overlook it. She didn't have time to put this woman in her place. Is it done? The Countess asked. Of course, the woman spat. If I can drown my own sister in a vat of soup, I can take care of some nobody in over her head. I'm glad to hear it. Your mole, by the way, is falling off. The woman glanced in the rearview mirror and pulled the little brown spot off. Cheap costume effects, the woman laughed. To think The only thing keeping me and my twin from being identical was an ugly mole. Poor Maxine. I hope they were able to cover it when they prepared her for burial. The Countess frowned. This woman was heartless. Useful, but heartless. Then again, what could you expect from someone's evil twin? I'll follow you, Minnie, she said. And Minnie made her way back to the highway, the Countess trailing close behind.
Thank you, Donna.
Hi, I'm Cassie Tweeten, and I'm reading episode 18. Jimmy clomped down the stairs, scratching his chin as he tried to think of a way out of the mess he'd gotten himself in. Lost in thought, he didn't see the other person heading up the stairs, also with her head down. They collided. Ah, screamed Pippi as she felt herself tumbling back. Before she could fall, though, Jimmy grabbed her wrist and pulled her towards him. Pippi leaned against him, rubbing her head. You saved my life, she said. I should have been looking for where I was going. It's my fault. I wasn't paying attention, Jimmy said. Pippi smiled and looked up at him. Penny for your thoughts? Oh, I don't know, Jimmy said. He might not be the sharpest box in the crayon, but he knew the less you told people, the less they could use your words against you. Well, I can tell you that I was lost in thought too, and it was about something very strange. Pippi looked at him considering. Why not ask Jimmy his opinion on what Mal had shown her? He was often in the background of Shady Bluff. Perhaps he'd seen or heard anything. Jimmy, do you know why the tulips in the garden were burned? She asked. No. Why were they? Jimmy responded. No, I was asking you if you knew anything about it. Jimmy shook his head. I was surprised to see someone do that. As much work as Cordelia put into those flower beds, it was as if someone was doing it just to hurt her. Pippi thought again about her discovery of the tulips. Her first response had been to get Cordelia to show her, but what had made her go out into the garden in the first place? She frowned, trying to remember. She'd been on her way to the supply closet to get out games for board game night, and she saw Mal coming towards her. I think Millicent is smoking in the garden again, she had said. Someone's going to need to clean up those cigarette butts. Which of course meant that Pippi was going to need to do it because Mal never helped with things like that. It was a not so well-kept secret that Millicent Trueworthy snuck cigarettes, but no one wanted to get her into trouble by telling the executive director. But when Pippi went out to the garden, there hadn't been any cigarette butts, just the scorched area where Cordelia's flowers had been burned. Pippi looked up at Jimmy. I think someone is trying to frame Cordelia. And she began to tell Jimmy about the notes Mal had received since her husband's car crash. Jimmy agreed that it didn't sound like something Cordelia Buttons would do. Maybe we should go talk to her. Pippi agreed, feeling confident that she and Jimmy together would be able to glean a clue from the notes that Mal had shown her. But when they drew near to the wellness director's office, they found she was already with someone. Luckily, they only had to wait another few minutes before the director's door opened and Mal walked with the Count out to the hallway. Count Dandy bowed his head in her direction and then walked away, rubbing the back of his neck. Mal smiled at Pippi and Jimmy. What brings you two to see me? I want to see those letters, Mrs. Practice, Jimmy said as they followed Mal into the office. Pippi closed the door so no one would hear. Pippi, I told you that in confidence, Mal said, and she moved between her desk, trying to control her annoyance. Pippi smiled, which is why I told Jimmy. He's very smart and he's a good listener, and I'm confident in him too. We can help. Jimmy blessed the compliments. Can I see the letters, Mrs. Practice? No, you may not, Mal said. I don't mean to be rude, but those letters were shown to Pippi, and I assumed she would keep them private and not tell anyone. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I feel so stupid, Pippi said after Mal threw them out of her office. But I just don't understand why Mal would think Cordelia would send her threatening letters. Mrs. Button wouldn't hurt a fly. Maybe, Jimmy said. Mal wants you to think Cordelia sent them. But why? I don't know, Jimmy said, stroking his jaw. But if I've learned anything since my time in the world, it's that everyone's got a secret reason for doing anything. You can't trust anyone, Pippi. Not even you? She asked, her eyes twinkling in hope as she looked up at Jimmy. Least of all me, Pippi. Oh, Jimmy, I'm so afraid something bad is going to happen. And Jimmy wrapped his arms around Pippi for a brief moment. Then he pulled away. I guess I better get back to work. Pippi smiled. Okay, but keep your ear and your eye out, all right? As Mal took a deep breath in her office, she could feel herself starting to shake. When she found the Count in the hallway in front of the elevator, he'd been knocked out cold. How relieved she was to hear him snort right before he woke up. That evil wife will be the death of me, he had said as he sat up. Despite his assurance he was fine, she insisted he come back to her office so she could look him over. But despite her alarm at his possible concussion, it was not any potential injury that had frightened her. For as he stood, a small folded piece of paper fell from his jacket pocket. Mal instantly recognized it. It was the same cornflower color as those ominous notes she'd received. Before the Count could notice it was missing, she snatched it up and put it in her pocket. She focused on encouraging the Count to talk. She asked him if he felt nauseous, checked that his vision wasn't blurry, feigned interest at the recount his wife's violence towards him. But she could only think about the letters she had taken, and that every moment felt more and more desperate and afraid that he was going to realize it was missing. Now that he had gotten rid of Pippi and that himbo Jimmy, Mal opened the letter and had fallen out of the Count's pocket. But the content was something completely different than she expected. It was a confession of sorts, a lost love, secrets, and betrayal. Mel read every page, her eyes widening with every paragraph.
Thank you, Cassie.
Hi, I'm Lenny, and I'll be reading episode 19. As Herman sat in his office going through all the employee paperwork he had to complete, his mind wandered to the conversation he'd just had with Percival. He winced at the recollection that he'd unburdened himself to a resident, confessing to his affair with Chef Maxine, and her warnings about Regina and Millicent that Regina wasn't to be trusted and Millicent was likely in trouble. He knew he was missing several pieces of a very large puzzle. He shook the thoughts from his head and returned his attention to the computer. And just as he began to get back into the flow of endless paperwork, the receptionist, Rebecca, popped her head in. Hey, there's a call on holding. It's Millicent's daughter. Oh, boy, thought Herman. Yet another person from my complicated past. He picked up the headset and brought it to his ear, pressing the button for the correct extension where the caller was parked. Good morning, Jessica. This is Herman. Good morning, Herman. Is the executive director not in today? Herman paused. No one knew where Regina was. He texted and called her cell phone, but not received an answer. She took the morning off, he said. He tried not to feel wounded that Jessica had not wanted to speak to him, but considering their history, it really wasn't a surprise. Okay. You would think the receptionist would know that, Jessica said. I'm calling about my mom. I assumed as much. What's going on? Have you noticed anything going on with her? Is she doing okay? She seems to be fine from what I've seen and heard, Herman said. I'm a little concerned. You know, Mom and I Zoom at least a couple times a week, but she missed her scheduled time. And when I finally got a hold of her, she seemed paranoid and skittish. She's always loved to fill me in on the community's gossip, but she didn't want to tell me about anything going on. She actually said that, Herman. I can't tell you about anything going on. Doesn't that seem strange? Herman admitted that it was a little weird, but he also thought a reluctance to gossip one time didn't mean that Millicent was paranoid. Not that he said that to Jessica. She knew her mother better than he did, and Herman hadn't been out of his office much lately with, all the paperwork he had to do. But he wanted to make Jessica happy. She'd been a teacher to his two daughters when they were freshmen in high school. They met at the first parent-teacher conference of that school year. He talked to her regularly about his daughter's education, and then as he got to know her, began to reach out more and more often. Herman knew that he was charming and was certain that he could win Jessica's heart too. He was a good dad. He was fun to talk to, and he knew he was a handsome man. But Jessica rejected him again and again. She said no to his offers of coffee, dinner, and extra meeting after school hours to talk about the girls' performance. And eventually, he realized that even though Jessica would look at him with those large brown eyes, and he knew she wanted to say yes, she was way too professional and self-possessed and driven by an inner moral compass that, he could not understand. As his attempts became more desperate, calling her home, sending her flowers, he found it hard to meet his wife's gaze. He knew At any moment now, he would be caught trying to woo his daughter's teacher, and his wife Bonnie had already told him that if he didn't get his extracurricular activities under control, she would leave him and take the girls. So he gave up his pursuit, cut the possibility of seeing Jessica out of his life completely. He found a house in another school district, and it was the kind of home that Bonnie always wanted, a 4-bedroom Georgian that looked out on a quiet street. If Bonnie ever suspected the real reason why they moved, she never mentioned it. And Herman had kept his wandering eye focused on his family and his home. Until Maxine came along and, of course, wrecked everything. Herman, Jessica said on the call, interrupting his train of thought. Yes, I asked when Regina was coming back. I think I should talk to her. You said she took the morning off. The morning or the day, I forget which. I'm always so inundated with paperwork, I sometimes lose track of things. I thought you monitored everyone's time off. Oh, right, Herman thought. I did tell her that the day she moved Millicent in. That was a surprise to find Jessica in the lobby holding her mother's hand as they looked around the foyer. His heart had jumped into his throat at the sight of her. She was so beautiful. Well, I do, but Regina is a special case, of course. I mean, I can't demand that my boss give me her whereabouts at all times. That's no way for anyone to run a community, Jessica said. She was quickly shedding her sweet side. Herman found that he had a lump in his throat. She could be so forceful when she needed to be. He found that very attractive. I'll check in on your mom, Jessica, Herman said. I'll be in touch soon. Jessica, Maxine, Regina. How do you always get so mixed up in everything? He was in love with Regina, but hearing Jessica's voice, it made him want to do whatever he could for her. He stood up and went to find Millicent Trueworthy and see if she was feeling poorly or if there was anything worrying her. He did a recall of a conversation Millicent and Regina had the week before, and Millicent had been upset, but while he repeatedly heard the words community and gossip, he not thought much about it. But he did remember Regina being awfully worked up after Millicent left her office. And it was pretty strange that Millicent would even be sharing gossip with Regina. They weren't friends, and Herman knew Regina to be very good about setting professional boundaries. She told him they couldn't start dating until after she'd been promoted to a regional director. He squared his shoulders. He was next in charge if Regina was out of commission, and until he had heard from her, he would take command. He mentally went over all the things he had to do today. Finish payroll, MC the pickleball classic at noon, help Pippi with the preparations for the Alzheimer's donation booth this afternoon. But the first thing he needed to do before he got back to doing all that paperwork was talk to Millicent. Bum, 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 to be continued.
Thank you to all of our readers. You guys were awesome. And Donna and Joe, thank you so much. Oh.
What was Lenny looking off of that? I was flipping papers. How did he keep flipping papers?
Probably was reading it off of his computer, I bet.
Yeah, I was reading it off my computer. Yeah. Was it
How'd
weird?
How'd you get on your computer? Just for what she downloaded or what she sent us?
Yeah, I just downloaded it and pulled it off to my desktop.
Oh, okay. That's neat. Because you were able to look right in it. Okay. Not be flipping papers.
Was it creepy? I was unsure. Was it really creepy, me just staring at the camera?
No.
Good. It was good.
It wasn't creepy at all. And Donna, you did fantastic, even if you weren't reading off of your computers.
Okay, thank you.